So when you sit, you can sit like this in hero pose. You can sit cross-legged. Just make sure that there's no more energy than necessary to keep you in your seat. And relax your hands somewhere midway on your lap, closer to the knees or closer to the hips. Make sure that your hand placement doesn't tug on the chest and doesn't either pull you forward or push you backward. And initially, you kind of want to drop the surface tension of your body. So when you close your eyes, you'll be able to feel the skin of your face a little bit better, the quality of your eyelids. So go ahead and relax those. And this is what we always do in the beginning of a practice. We have a little time to check in where we're, in a very palpable way, we're switching gears from the speed that we needed to be moving at prior to class to now what is the speed, what is the mode of operation, psychologically speaking, during practice. And one of the best ways to switch those gears is to just kind of flush out the tensions from the day and the week via relaxing. Make sure that you're planting your sit bones in such a way on the ground or on the block that it has a slight little hint of an anterior tilt, which basically feels like you're subtly sticking your butt out. There are 4 qualities that are outlined in the traditions of Buddhism and yoga that are referred to as the Brahma Viharas, which translates roughly to something like the divine abodes or the abodes of God. And it stresses 4 qualities. It stresses friendliness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And for our asana practice, this quality of equanimity, of upeksha, or upekshanam, seems to be really applicable. And equanimity, in this tradition sense, means it's dispassion and control in the face of adversity, in the face of challenge and hardship. And because a dynamic yoga practice is really one that is laden with plenty of challenge and plenty of structural and functional hardship, this is a quality that we can really build up. And this is a good training ground to keep this quality of equanimity for any impending other life hardships that are virtually guaranteed, so that we don't lose or ground our marbles when things really get tough, as they inevitably do. Bring your hands together at your heart. Make sure that the whole thumb line of your hands, from the tips to the bases, is in nice contact to the sternum. And this is a way that we kind of unify the 3 aspects of devotion, passion, action, and intelligence. The head, the hands, and the heart. Gently let your head bow down towards the hands to acknowledge this, to acknowledge yourself. Acknowledge, first and foremost, your experience and its validity. And then you can carefully release your hands to your lap Gently lift your chin and even more gently open your eyes. And just staying sitting for another minute, interlace your fingers in front of you and then turn your hands inside out forward. So you're pointing your palms in front of you. Do the best you can to get your elbows straight. And when we go into the next part, notice just the composition of your face right now, your jaw, the texture and structure of your tongue, the texture of your forehead and eyelids. And stay committed to that as we go into it. So then slowly start to lift your arms up and be honest with yourself that if there's an initial amount of inflexibility or restriction that you feel that prevents you from getting the arms into a fully vertical position, that you just respect that boundary. And how you know if your arms have reached their limit of flexion is if you ever notice that your spine starts to go into a back bend, right? So Michelle has a nice straight spine here, that's not happening. But if she could just show what a little bit of a back bend would look like. So yeah, go even a little bit further. So you see, this is what can happen as a compensation for restrictions either in the pec minor or in your lats when you're trying to bring your arms overhead. So when you pull these front ribs back, it's almost as if you're doing a little bit of a sit-up in an upright position. The last 5 breaths, push the tips of your index and middle fingers into the backs of your hands and provoke your hands and the whole chain of your arms to slide up so you can actually feel how the anatomy of your shoulders starts to come up and cradle the head. And take 2 more breaths like this so that every inhale is a little more lift in the arms, which causes more elongation in the torso, and every exhale is the sustainment of that. Okay, and on your next exhale, go ahead and bring the hands. Go ahead and bring the arms down, and then come forward onto all fours. And let's go into our downward dog. First downward dog. Okay, and then setting yourself up in downward dog. The first downward dog, you can kind of be a little bit more forgiving with yourself. And if you need to pedal your heels, move your hips around in any good, functional, useful way, then of course, get into that. But as you're doing that, as you're doing your warm-up movements, or even if you just stay still, relax your neck and let your head hang. And then start to kind of gradually amplify the intensity of your output as far as the hands, the arms, the legs go. Good. Make sure that your arms and elbows are straight. And as we just did with Parvatasana, when you were lifting your arms up above the head, press your hands into the floor the same exact way, so that the attempt, in this case, is to recreate that action, but in this orientation of your body, this takes your head further off the ground. And I can't really stress that enough, that we don't want to actually relax the shoulders in downward dog, which seems to be a very common description of events and technique that is propagated out there in yoga land. And then looking at the feet, make sure that if you have a little bit more restriction in your hamstrings right now, you can set your feet wide. You can set your feet as wide as your mat, maybe even wider than your mat. Try to get the heels to the mat, but of course, there's a catch there. If the heels come to the ground a little bit too easily, then you want to step the feet back some, so it takes more effort to get them down, or possibly to a point where you can't get them down just yet. But we got to be honest about the fact that getting the heels to the floor is not the most important thing in dog pose, and it's still just as beneficial of a dog pose without the heels on the ground. But the attempt to get them down, that's what really counts. It's the action underlying the position. Lift your toes up for 2 more breaths. Relax your jaw. Relax your tongue. And then next inhale, lift the heels up. Exhale, bend your knees. Walk, step, or hop forward towards the hands. Maybe not hop on the first one anyways. And then feet together. Inhale, lengthen and broaden your torso and half lift. And exhale,
Fold down, keeping as much of that broadness in the torso. Again, inhale, lengthen, half lift, keep the toes up, legs straight and sturdy, exhale, fold. Good, one more like that, inhale. Lengthen a little bit more, fill up with a little more of that respiratory volume, exhale, fold, and get to the very absolute end of your breath. On the next inhale, with a straight spine, come all the way up so that your hands come together at the top as your breath, inhale, reaches its culmination. Exhale, arms down. Beautiful. Inhale, arms up, our first official sun salutation. And exhale, fold forward using your quadriceps as the main lead-in action to make it happen. On the next inhale, lengthen, half lift, broaden the ribs, torso. Keep the half lift composition of your torso. Step back to high plank. We'll take 3 extra breaths in high plank. Since it's a pretty hot and sweltering day, won't overdo it too much on the strength work, but we still have to, of course, get our muscles excited and functional. Keep your legs active. If for the first one, you need to come to the floor just to take it easy on the shoulders or any other part of the body, that's fine. And if you have some injury from the wrist to the shoulders, somewhere along that line, you can, of course, come down to the mat every time. So modify as needed. Take an inhale together, and then when you exhale, lower down either to the floor or to low plank. And then inhale, come forward for 3 breaths into upward dog or cobra. If you're in upward dog, actually in either pose, engage your glutes. And then if you close your eyes, or at least partially close them, take yourself right back into your experience. So you're not so much facing the world. You're not so much calculating the outside environment. You're really taking the inner environment into account. And next exhale, pull your belly button back to place yourself back to dog pose. And reset the hands, reset the arms, feet, and legs as you did before. And think about these repetitive poses. You do a dog pose several times, pretty much every yoga class you do, right? Or child's pose or mountain pose. And so what you want to also keep in mind is that there is space for these repetitive postures to get better every time you practice. And just because it might feel very satisfying, your level of accomplishment or competence in a posture to date, it doesn't mean that there's still no room for growth and no more room for development and improvement. Next inhale, lift the heels. Exhale, bend your knees. Walk, step, or perhaps hop if you like. If you're feeling hoppy, good, nice and soft. Inhale, lengthen, broaden. Exhale, fold to the end of your breath. And with a flat spine, it's like you're taking your half lift spine all the way up with you. Come up to stand. And exhale, arms come down to the sides. As you inhale, lift your arms again. Really engage your glutes. And then when you exhale, relax the glutes and now engage the quadriceps. So we see that every movement of the torso has something to do with the legs. Inhale, lengthen, still quad work. And as you exhale, step back and lower to your low plank or to cobra. Keep the quads on line. Exhale and back to downward dog. When you get there, relax, right? It's not just relax, but it's relax again. And even on that note, think about those implications. If there's room for growth and development and improvement in a posture, we can also have the same assumption that there is more development potentially in something like relaxation. And even though you might have gained good ground in your current skills of relaxing, it doesn't mean that it could not get better. Take an next inhale as you lift your heels up. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step, or hop forward. On the inhale, lengthen and broaden the torso. Keep your quads with you. Exhale, fold. With a nice long flat spine, inhale, come all the way up to stand with your hands connecting at the very top. And exhale, arms down. Let's do one more like that. Big inhale, big arm lift, nice, big, strong, squeezy glutes, you guys, squeeze them. Exhale, fold. Nice. On the next inhale, lengthen the torso, broaden the ribs. And then exhale, keep that half lift position of your torso even through your descent into low plank. Coming out of upward dog when you do, returning back to downward dog. Have a little bit more appreciation, or at least start developing a little bit more appreciation for the legs. And in downward dog, all you have to know is basically it's a hip flexed position. So it's more of a forward bend that's taking place in the legs and hips. So a forward bend implies that it's the front of the legs that need to be the most active. That's why when you lift your toes up, I almost said toys, when you lift your toes up, it really starts to recruit the rest of the muscles along the front of your legs, eventually culminating in good action in your quads. So you can use these outside agents to recruit more skill of what's most relevant. Next inhale, lift the heels. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step or hop forward. Inhale, lengthen and broaden, keep the toes flared. Exhale, fold. And with a long, flat spine, inhale, come all the way up to stand like a reverse swan dive. And then exhale, arms down at the sides. Okay, the next variation of sun salute, or B form, bend your knees. On the inhale, going into Utkatasana, 3 breaths on this first one. Make sure most of your body weight is fallen into your heels, which again, lifting your toes becomes very useful for. And another part of the leg movement, action here, is how well you can squeeze, like literally mash or smash your thighs together without deviating that position and the weight bearing of the heels. Next, exhale, straighten your legs and fold down. On the inhale, lengthen and broaden the torso. One exhale to jump or step back and lower to your low plank. Inhale slowly to upward dog, and coming out of upward dog to downward dog, step your right foot forward, and we're going to go into high lunge. If you have more of a preference for warrior one, you can do warrior one, but I would encourage more high lunging. That means back heels off the ground, and you're kind of like striding to get the back foot vertical. Solidify your back leg, just in terms of making it more straight from the direction of your quad, the perspective of your quad. And then when you're ready, you can lift your arms up. Good. So 3 more breaths here. Reinstate the action of lifting your shoulders as we did from that first sitting position. Remember? You got one more big inhale here. Very good pose. Exhale as your hands come down. Step your right leg back and lower to your low plank on the same out breath. Come up to upward dog slowly. Coming out of upward dog, step your left foot forward on the same exhale. And then come up to your high lunge. And you deal with things. There's a priority list, which, as I said before, it's not the same as a hierarchy. So priority means what's on the ground deserves first attention. So get your feet right. Then get your legs right, keep the back leg solid, get your right glute right as an active, and then when you're ready, lift your arms. Project that entire shoulder girdle up. So you're not actually trying to create space between the head and the shoulder. You're trying to take that space up by lifting up with the arms more intensely. One more breath in. And then exhale, place your hands down on the same out breath, lower to your low plank. And then when you get back to downward dog, recalculate and reassemble the downward dog with quality. And that's where this practice really starts to bear its so-called fruit. That it's not so much of how many sun salutations we can do or even how many poses we can do, but it always comes down to the quality of what you are doing. And you can do yoga if you have quality of just sitting and raising your arms up that you might not never be able to get in a handstand, for example. It's really about how well you're consuming your current physical posture, current physical state. Next inhale lifts the heels. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step, or hop forward. On your inhale, lengthen your torso, lift your toes. Exhale as you fold, contract your quadriceps. At the very first sign of the next inhale, bend your knees into Utkatasana. So we took 3 breaths to come in, we'll take 3 breaths to come out. Heel weight bearing dominant and squeezing, adducting your thighs. And that's really it. Take one more breath of that. As you exhale, just stand up straight and bring your arms down. Nice. Inhale, lift your arms, bend your knees, Utkatasana. Exhale, straighten your legs while folding. Inhale long. Exhale, step back and slow down your exhale so you make sure you get to the base of it. Coming out of upward dog, step your right foot forward, back to high lunge. Good. Once you get your arms overhead, keep your left glute engaged. Okay, so now where we're going to go, just kind of give you a little bit of more foresight. We're going to turn to the right, but keep the lunge of the legs. So then turn your torso, bring your arms parallel to the ground. So it's basically like you're doing warrior 2 to the right, but you still keeping your lunge as it is. Keep the front knee no less bent than you had in the pre-twist lunge, and then keep that back leg attentive, right? And we all know what it means. If somebody says, make your legs more attentive, usually you don't have to define that any further. Now you're going to keep the rotation at the torso and then lower down, place your left hand on the floor, leave your right arm up. There it is. So we took the vertical twist and we translated it to more of a horizontal position. Because you have your left hand on the ground, it's a little bit more encouraging to keep your back leg engaged, where before there's a lot that you had to manage with your balance. One more inhale like this. As you exhale, bring your right hand down, step your right leg back. On the same exhale, try to lower down to the base of your low plank. Coming up to upward dog. As you get back to downward dog, step your left foot forward right away. Right away, but not in a hurry. And then come on up. So hands either on the hips to start or arms overhead from the get-go. Remember, back foot is striving to get vertical as much as you can, because then that implements the toe sit that we sometimes do. Now, without changing a single thing about your leg, like a single atom about your legs, turn to the left, bring your arms parallel to the floor. So, challenge, you can tell, is more in terms of balance in this pose. So if your balance seems to be pretty steady, challenge it. And one way to challenge it is to start looking back and maybe even landing your eyes right on your left hand or your left thumb. One more breath in. Exhale, bring your right hand down, leave your left arm up. Beautiful. And so for 5 breaths in this twist, keep the back leg steady. And in order to constantly undermine that reflex that we all have in the feet, keep lifting your toes in the front, because it'll get you to be more conscious and considerate of your foot, which then changes everything else above the feet. Next exhale, bring your left hand down. And on the same exhale, try to lower down to the epitome of your low plank. And then from upward dog, we come back to downward dog, and we settle in for another 5 breaths. Good. Relax your neck, let your head drop, relax your mouth, relax your throat. You probably noticed that your throat is inside of the neck. So if you can relax your throat, there's a lot more likelihood that you can relax your neck. But really the best shortcut to relaxing the neck is what? You got to relax the face. And if you ever want to test it out, not right now, of course, it's impossible to keep your neck relaxed if any part of your face or your expression is contracted, like kind of tight and tense. Good. Next inhale, lift the heels up. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step, or hop forward. As you inhale, lift halfway, broaden the ribs. As you exhale, fold. At the first sign of your inhale, bend your knees, Utkatasana, just 1 breath. And as you exhale, straighten your legs, arms down. Okay, so we'll do a 3rd one just to come into it, and we'll start to then proceed to the rest of our standing poses. Bend your knees, Utkatasana. Inhale. Exhale, straighten your legs and fold. Inhale, lift halfway, and then again, keep the structure of that half lift in the torso, and then step back, lower to low plank. So really that half lift torso stays right through the vinyasa. As you come back to downward dog, step your right foot forward. Guess what? Again, high lunge. How could it be anything else? Okay, so let's give the arms a little bit more of a break. Place your hands on your hips, because I want you to pay attention more to your legs here. The back leg is going to stay the same now. What you're going to do is straighten your front leg on the inhale. And when your front leg straightens, use your glutes to try to tilt your pelvis backwards. So posterior tilt, where you're pulling your butt into the body. And then keep that frame of your pelvis as is when you bend your front knee again on the exhale. So just maybe a couple more. Inhale, straighten the front leg. Encourage more posterior tilt. Exhale, keep the posterior tilt bend. Last one. Inhale, straighten the front leg. Tilt your pelvis back. Exhale, bend your front knee. Good. Now take your arms overhead. Straighten your front leg. Keep your arms overhead. Place the back heel on the mat and start the base of triangle pose. Once you get the base, bring your arms horizontally. Lift your front toes. Remember, that helps recruit more of that anterior anatomy of your legs. And then exhale, reach your torso forward as you glide your hips back. And so, as I've said it before, the whole point is to get more of this lateral pelvic tilt, where your right hip is actually sitting below the left hip. And the more of that you can encourage, the more comparable the size of the torsos will be in length. On your next exhale, bend your front knee, come into side angle position. Good. Try to look up underneath your arm. So you're not looking at the ceiling from above the arm, you're looking at it from underneath. Yep. And the next exhale, place your left hand down, step your right leg back, same exhalation lowers you to low plank. And then coming out of upward dog, step your left foot forward, high lunge again. Okay, like we did before, place your hands back on the hips. And then inhale, straighten your front leg, tilt your pelvis back. Exhale, bend your front knee as you keep your pelvis intact. Inhale, straighten, keep the glutes with you. Exhale, as you sit, keep your lower belly lifted. One more time. Inhale, lift your low belly, keep your pelvis tucked back. Exhale, bend the front knee, keep everything lifted. And then take your arms overhead. Inhale, straighten the front leg. Keep your arms there, pivot the back heel down, start the base of triangle. And then when that's intact, bring your arms to the rest of triangle pose. You might want to look at your front knee, and remember this is a universal principle. Never let your knees face any direction that's different than the direction of your toes. So those have to orient in the same plane. Exhale, reach forward into the rest of the triangle. One way to think about this lateral pelvic tilt is you're basically attempting to take this crease of your left hip and kind of cut it in a little bit more and make it a little bit deeper, which can only happen at the behest of these left quads. One more breath in. Next exhale, go right into side angle pose, bend your front knee. Good. Look at the ceiling from underneath your upper arm and get that top elbow more straight. Good. One more breath in. And exhale, place your right hand down, step your left leg back, and take in this final vinyasa. Maybe a final vinyasa. I haven't really made up my mind yet. Once you get back to downward dog, relax your jaw, relax your face. And like I said earlier, doesn't matter if your heels get to the ground, still lift your toes up. Always lift the toes up. There's really no reason to not do this, especially in flexing positions, hip flexion. Okay, on the next inhale, lift your heels up. Exhale, bend the knees. Walk, step, or hop forward. And then just keep your feet apart, and we'll go right into this next Uttanasana. From here, you're going to interlace your fingers behind your back. Make sure that when you clasp your hands, you exercise some of this intensity in how the tips of your fingers are interacting with the backs of your hands. So keep the clench tight. Keep your palms touching. First, try to straighten your elbows, and after your elbows get straight, then begin to pull your arms way over and above the head, or beyond the body. But if your hands at any point begin to unglue and separate away from where they started, just pull your arms back a little bit so that we never want to lose integrity in the shoulders for the sake of flexibility. The only flexibility that is safe is the flexibility that's also grounded in strength. And if your range of motion can only be passively flexible, it is not going to be a applicable and healthy range of motion. One more breath out. Good. Release your arms down. And then step your way back to downward dog. If you'd like to take a vinyasa to kind of keep the heat up, then feel free. Somebody wants to keep the heat up, it appears. Okay, so from this downward dog, I want to start to work into some hip extension. So step your right foot forward between the hands. Bring your left knee down to the mat. If you need a little pad for your left knee, then of course use it. And this is where your block is going to come in handy. So you can either have one or two blocks. I'll show both variations. When your hands on the floor, you want to make sure that you try to get your left knee as far back behind you, as far back away from the front foot as possible. So when you increase the distance between your back knee and your front foot, what happens is your pelvis comes closest to the ground. So find where that is, find how far your left knee can go back. And when that's happening, you take one block and you put that right underneath your sitting bone. And then once it's there, come up and sit upright. Now, if one block wasn't enough, of course, on the tower setting, what you can do is take two blocks, make sure that the bottom block is like this on its flattest, shortest side, and then the other block is on top, so it kind of looks like an upside down letter T, and you sit on that. But once you get sitting, number one thing is that the block should take away any of your own mechanism of balancing out of the picture. Okay, so this is going to slowly start to kind of peel open the left front hip flexion area. So let's do a little bit of something more with the shoulders. You're going to take your right arm behind you and then internally rotate your right arm. And we're going to start to set up for this Gomukhasana position of the arms. Make sure that when you get this internal rotation, you take your hand a little bit higher up. And if your elbow is way out to the side of the body, start by using your left hand to reach back behind you and kind of tuck the right elbow in. And then you're going to take your left arm, and this is where your belt might come in handy. You're going to elevate the left shoulder blade. And once it's fully elevated, bend the elbow and try to grab one or more of your fingertips. And of course, if you can't reach your hands or fingers right now, use a block, strap. So when you get into this position, talking about the arms and the shoulders, what's going to be tempting is to have your head be kind of thrust forward by the pressure of your top arm, your left arm. I want you to do the opposite. I want you to push your head back, yes, into your arm, so you're helping to create a little bit more deeper flexion of your shoulder. And so what's happening is you're taking the shoulder, left shoulder into deep flexion, and you're taking the left hip into deep extension. But what it really does is it creates a line of tension all the way from the arm, the front of the torso, and then connects it to the line of tension, the line of stretch on the front of your left hip. And you might discover that this whole hip flexor narrative doesn't just stop at the hips, it actually extends through the whole body. Release your hands carefully. Place your hands on the mat. and then switch legs. Nice and gently. And picking it up from the top. When you come down with your back knee, keeping your hands on the mat, you want to lengthen the space between your front foot and back knee, not by reaching your front foot forward, but by reaching your right knee backward. Right, so if you need those two blocks, here's what that upside down T position would look like. And you sit right there. Okay? Otherwise, you sit on one block, make sure that you feel your sitting bone well established. Here, let me turn it. And the other thing I would suggest is, you see what I just did for Michelle? I took the block from this position and I turned it 90 degrees to the side so that she has more width laterally on the block. And that will give her that lateral stability, because if you're gonna lose your balance, you're not gonna lose it falling over backwards and forwards, you're gonna lose it falling to the left or right. So you wanna just make sure to kind of be prepared for that. Okay, so once you get sitting, notice what the line of stretch is like on the front of your right hip, the front of your right leg. And the way that you know we're isolating the whole hip flexor, as in psoas, on the right side, is because the knee is almost straight. If we bent the knee, then we'll start to take the quads into it. Now, let's go with the arms. You're going to take your left arm underneath, behind you. Internally rotate that left arm. Make sure your palm faces back, and then lift your right arm. Yeah, tuck the left elbow in if you need. Perfect. And then when you lift your right arm, lift up through the shoulder blade, externally rotate the right arm, and then bend the elbow and reach back. If you can grab more than just one fingertip, make sure that all the fingertips that are interacting with each other, they're interacting with the same degree of pulling, right? So you don't have like one side that's bullying the whole rest of the fingers out of position. So being upright here, like we did before, press your head back into your right arm, and you can even start to go into a little bit more back bend, a little bit more extension. Make sure your right glute is turned on, and if it's possible, or if it's approachable to you, start to close your eyes and let yourself get a little bit more well cooked in this pose from that whole internal paradigm where you're taking time to appreciate your inner experience and not just throwing all your eggs in the basket of what's on the outside. One more breath out. Nice, and then release your right arm, bring the right hand down, left hand down, and then let's come down, and guess what? Switch sides. So now we can go even a little bit further. So when you get your right leg forward, left leg back, given that we've been working on flexibility and hip extension already for one set, you're going to bring your back knee down. And again, lengthen the distance between your front foot and back knee. If this time, the second time around, you seem to create a little bit more flexibility, then you don't have to just stay on this single tall block position. You can turn your block to the next level down. Just make sure that you can actually sit on the block, right? If you're leaning way too far over to the right, that's not really true sitting. Now, the footnote about this is if you can get your block lower than on that tower setting, you'll probably need to move your front leg off to the right? So I'll face the camera just so you guys can see what I mean by that. You can move your whole right foot to the right so that your toes and the angle of your thigh is more on a 1 or 2 o'clock plane. And that'll create more space in the hips because the structure of your hip is designed to help your leg move laterally as it goes deeper into flexion. Okay, so I probably should have told you to get your belt out before this pose, but I hope it's not too far. What you're going to do is take your belt, make sure that you have not too big of a loop, I would say a little bit bigger than your foot, and you're going to loop it around your back foot. Right? Try not to get it all the way to the ankle. Okay. Then you're going to take the tail of the belt, and sling it right over your left shoulder. Okay, now maintaining balance sitting on the block, take the strap with both hands and initially push the strap horizontally forward. And so as you push the strap forward, it's going to pull your back foot off the ground. Now, it doesn't matter how high your foot comes up, just try to get it up as far, obviously, as is tolerable. And you're going to keep pulling and pulling the belt forward initially. Once you get the foot up to its limit, then how you want to secure it in place is to then point the belt down and hold the belt like this closer to the torso. So then all you have to do is just kind of keep a good amount of tension, just a minimal amount of tension, tugging it down, and your foot will stay in place. Good. So then close your eyes, and we'll just kind of remain steady for half a minute or so. And then closing your eyes, find what's happening in the left glute, and if you can have a little bit more happening, which means engaging, the exaggeration and engagement of your left glute is going to promote more lengthening of the psoas, the hip flexor. But the difference here is that you've added your quadriceps into the equation. And one of your quadriceps, the rectus femoris specifically, is also a classical hip flexor because it bends the hip and not just only straightens the knee. And let's gently start to let the foot back down to the mat. Good. And then bring your hands to the floor and then gently switch sides. But now let's get the belt prepared for the foot before we go too deep. So when you first bring your right knee down, you're going to take your belt around the right foot and then make sure that it doesn't go all the way past the heel. And you're going to place the rest of the strap right next to you so that you can't reach it when you need it. But for now, you're going to place the block on that same lower setting if you had it lower the second time around. Make sure that you're sitting on that left sitting bone. Okay, move your front leg out of the way a little bit. Good. Lift your low belly up and then pick up your belt and sling it over your right shoulder. And then start to pull the belt forward. And it's more of a push, right, because you're pushing it away from the body, but it's pulling as far as the back of the torso is concerned. So as you pull your heel closer and closer to the back of the body, when it hits its limit, then again, anchor your belt down so that your hands and your shoulders don't have to stay too engaged. You can actually just keep the shoulders depressed and still keep all of the good qualities of this pose. Close your eyes. And meditate on what the difference is between the right glute now and the left glute just a little while ago. Meditate on the difference between how open or how resistant the right hip is to this kind of flexibility as opposed to the left hip. And not just meditate on that, but always take mental notes when you do the same thing from left to right. Does it tend to refer to any other parts of the body? Are there other parts of your anatomy that feel like they're getting stimulated or hit in some way that you didn't feel before? Parts of the body that have nothing to do, at least apparently, to the right hip. One more breath out there. Good. And then release the belt, let your foot come down. Bring your hands to the mat. And then let's lay down on the belly. Place your hands in line with the shoulders, not directly underneath, because that can be too confining. Grip the floor with your fingertips. Bring your legs all the way together just to start. And first thing is press your toenails firmly into the floor. When you press your toenails into the floor, you're also going to press the tops of your feet into the floor, which is good to protect your ankles. And you might feel your knees lift when that happens. So engage the glutes, press the tops of the feet down, and then start to exert some of that pulling forward action of the arms. So the initial direction is as if you're trying to slide yourself right off the front of the mat. And when you feel that action really coalesce in place, then start to push up a little bit more. As long as every little nuance of pushing yourself further off the ground is preceded by that pulling forward attempt of your arms, which means that you're always taking care to create space. And when you get the space between the vertebra and the spine, then that space is what creates and allows the movement. If you do happen to be able to go all the way up into this full cobra, as Michelle is doing, make sure that your pelvis, especially your pubic bone, is still in good contact with the mat. And that is created by nothing less than full glute competence, right? Full gluten pose when back bends are the target. One more breath in. Good. Exhale, slowly lower down. And in between poses, either keep your forehead on the mat or turn your head to the sides, but relax your arms, relax your feet, relax your legs. Make sure that when you relax your feet, yes, you relax them in an internally rotated position, which just means your toes are going to be facing in, your kneecaps are going to be turned in slightly. And then you just drop the action of the legs, the hips, and feet. In between back bends, why this internal rotation works is it's going to help you continuously create space in your SI joints on the back of the pelvis. Those SI joints have a propensity to get compressed whenever we do back bends. Okay? So let's do one more of these cobras. You're going to place your hands underneath your shoulders, in line, with the shoulders, and then start to again come up. Pick up where you left off. Now, if you can get your arms straight, make sure that you're not collapsing into the shoulders with the arms straight. There's a binary action to this, which means 2, shoulders down, which you achieve by pushing away from the floor, and then shoulders back away from the chest, which is achieved by that pulling forward technique. Yeah, this is great. Take one more breath in, and then exhale, slowly lower yourself down. And press right back to child's pose from there. Okay, from child's pose, let's just roll right over onto the back. And you're going to lay down as if you're going to start bridge pose. So lay down with your knees bent, your feet flat. Okay, so what I want you to do next is position your arms. So here's what's going to happen. And you can see how Michelle does it as I do it, so you can see me from the back at the same time. You're going to take your arms overhead. You're going to cross your arms, and then you're going to reach. You can lift your head up, lift your upper chest, upper back up, and you're going to place your right hand over your left shoulder, your left hand over the right. And then you're going to land that back on the mat just as she has it, and try to press your own head right into the arms. So what you're doing, in fact, is you're creating a little bit more depth of shoulder flexion just by laying down. So now you're really allowing gravity to create a little bit more depth in this position. And so what you might notice is because your left arm is underneath, more in contact with the floor, or your right arm, whichever arm that is, that shoulder is getting more flexion. Okay, so lift your head, take your arms out, and then cross your arms back into the same position with the other arm on top or the other arm on bottom. Yep. And where you want your head is pretty much like right at the intersection of your forearms, like right at the crossroads there. And you're pinning down mostly the arm that's closest to the head, but that arm is pinning down the arm that's below it. But the question is still the same when you do same posture on left and right. What is the difference? If you had to pick one side of this that was more comfortable, which one would you pick? All right, so as we know, deep shoulder flexion and hip extension are the necessary, indispensable qualities of doing a full back bend. So you're going to take your arms out. Keep your arms overhead with the arms straight though. Good. Make sure that your palms are facing each other and you're kind of like slicing into the ground with the thumb line of your hands. And then lift your pelvis up for bridge. That's it. It doesn't make any sense to open your eyes and try to look. So this, if anywhere, is really a great time where the skill of proprioception of your body comes to use, is when you notice which way your feet are directed so that your toes always have this neutral, straight railroad track type of position. And if you get your pelvis up a little bit higher, see if you can also press your arms into the floor. Your hands and wrists are touching the ground, but are your elbows making the same amount of contact? And furthermore, is there a difference between how well the left upper arm and the right upper arm are also pressing into the floor? Okay, and then come on down with your pelvis. It's up to you. You can leave your arms overhead just to keep the record of that deep flexion, or you can bring your arms down. Okay, let's go for our second round. And you don't have to go any further than bridge pose, but here's kind of like the next stepwise sequence of what you can do. So if you want to just watch and then do it, here's how it's going to go. So first part is you just lift your pelvis up. Good. So if you're going to stick with that, make sure that you're really doing a good job. Part two is you place your hands next to your head. So get ready for that full back bend. Make sure your fingers are spread open wide. So you could just stay there, but you could probably go further if you got this far. Step three is you inhale, come to the top of your head. And then when you stop there, you can stay here the whole time. Make sure that your fingers are facing away from the center of the mat and your elbows are not winging out further than the width of your wrists and shoulders. And then step four, of course, is you inhale, get all the way up, straighten the arms, and then you can check in with your hands one more time if you need to, but eventually you just relax your neck and let your head just simply hang. But meanwhile, keep blasting your arms into the floor so you're attempting to lift your chest and heart closer to the ceiling just by driving your arms down. Okay, so if you were watching, then your turn to come on into it. So as you're getting yourself up into this, by the time you're in your full back bend, Michelle has her heels down, but if you notice, she had them lifted before. You can keep your heels lifted the entire time. That'll actually take a lot of pressure off of your lower back. But of course, because we're always working towards progress, if you do get your heels down, try to retain the neutral orientation of your toes a little bit more. Beautiful. And then having that in place, connect the inside of your foot, the inner edge of your foot to the ground a little bit more. And on your 5th exhale or 10th exhale, as the case may be, come on down. And in between sides, between poses, bring your knees and thighs to lean against each other, feet apart. Close your eyes and just kind of lay there and appreciate in your own atmosphere the aftermath of back bending. And it seems to be very vibrant. It seems to be very tangible how we stimulate the response from the body from doing back bend work. And what I always like to remark about this is if you start to become more familiar with what poses elicit what physiological responses in the body, then you can use postures to support where your life is from day to day or even hour to hour, depending on what you need. Right? So if you need to be a little bit more energized, there's some set of poses that you do. And if you need to get ready for bedtime, there's another set of poses. So since it's so far from bedtime, let's just do our last set. You're going to lift your pelvis up, place your hands next to your ears. If you're doing just bridge, make sure it's a good bridge. Drive your heels down. Otherwise, go through those steps. And if you get to that 4th step of being fully up, then what you can do is walk your hands slowly closer to your feet. I would say don't walk your feet closer to your hands because that can misalign your hips. And the final frontier is you use the legs to push the chest back, right? So it's like you're kicking your chest forward away from the feet. Keep your glutes engaged, keep your lower belly lifted, guys. So let's take 2 more breaths. If your heels are down, even a bridge pose, inner edges of the heels are the priority. On the next inhale, come on down. And then thighs and knees together, feet wide. Close your eyes and savor the post back bend flurry. Right? It's like a residue. Something happens and then there's results. And in this way, that's what makes yoga practice scientific. Is that we don't just do things out of dogma, hopefully. We do them because we actually like the response, we like the results of the given experiment. So that's it for the back bending today. Hug your legs to your chest. Give yourself a nice deep hug. Good. Make sure that your knees and your thighs are apart so you have room for the abdomen. And just imagine you're trying to wedge your knees into your armpits. Okay. And we'll take this into a nice releasing spinal twist. So first, cross your right thigh over your left thigh. If you can go into a full eagle bind with your legs, you can go that way too. Turn your pelvis and your legs over to the left. Just make sure, as Michelle is showing so nicely here, that your top knee, the right knee right now, is either right in line with the hip or even slightly above it. And as you turn to the right with the torso and turn to the left with your pelvis, think about what that means, because we usually think a twist is just when you start turning in one direction. But really, if you break it down in detail, what creates a twist, what defines a twist, is that one end of the body is twisting one direction, and the other end is twisting the opposite direction. Because if everything was twisting the same direction, you would just end up doing a circle. There would be no twist. When you inhale, bring your knees back to center and cross the other way. So left thigh on top, go into a full eagle bind if you did so before. And then you roll over to the right. It makes sense if you want to just roll over with your whole body initially, and then turn your torso to the left. All I ask is that you try to do the best you can to keep the left knee down, which is the knee that's on top. You make sure that that's on the floor, even if your left arm and your left shoulder blade is not on the floor. And then you breathe, simply. And you don't have to breathe with too much pressure, but just kind of notice as your breath fills in, what is the effect on the structure of the twist? And how is it different to when you're breathing out? Now, knowing how your inhale and exhale correlate or interact with the mechanism of twisting also gives you more insight in what a twist actually is as a property of your respiratory system. On the next inhale, bring your knees to center. And now time for Shavasana. So get yourself set up. Make sure that you have at least a little bit of a lift underneath your head, unless a physical therapist or a doctor has told you to do something different for your neck. But if you just curl up the top of your mat, all you need is about 1 or 2 inch lift of the head. And then you take a little towel, yes, and you place that right over your eyes. And if it's too hot to have a towel over your eyes, you can take like your strap like this, double it up, and that'll be enough to cover your eye sockets. Yeah, keep your nose open so you can still breathe, since that is kind of important. And then try to mold your towel or whatever you are putting over your face right now around your nose so that really no light has chance to provoke your visual system. Feel just right now, how articulate are you being about just how you're placing yourself down on the mat, right? You're not just like a bag of bones. You don't want to just like throw the thing down in the corner of the room and it's like, rest. You took this time, you built up the precision in your practice, the fine touch of your practice that you can really leverage to make a good shavasana. So how well your body weight is distributed on the right sides of the body and its various contact points to the left, how straight and in position your head and skull feels, and what does it mean to aspire to a quality shavasana, right? It's not about quantity. It's not just about the time you spend in it. And now you enjoy it. So the main part of the practice is over, where that skill of equanimity was forged. And now you can let that go and just allow yourself to relish the comfort of a body that's been upgraded and updated. Thank you for practicing with us today. Thank you to Michelle for her excellent demonstrations.